Welcome to the Hot Summer 70s Family Horror
on the Family Pictures Podcast.
Thank you. I'm here, as usual, with my ready, steady, and regular guest host. Are you guest host? No, you're regular co-host.
Yeah, we're both hosts.
We've been doing this together for a while now.
Yeah.
What is this, episode what?
This will be 27, I think.
Jesus.
Yeah, this will be 20, or maybe 26 and 27. I think this is 27, and this is the beginning of a 5-film arc.
The Hot Summer 70s Family Horror.
Which is being hosted for the first time live. It
is unique.
My partner in crime here is normally in Italy. We are in Jamaica, Queens, in New York City, which is where I teach at York College.
That's right, CUNY.
Yeah, CUNY for life, motherfucker, right?
For life. I love it.
I bleed CUNY blood.
I wore my CUNY. Let's move this.
Yeah, I wore oddly my Missouri fantasy card shop t-shirt, so that's not the same.
That's weird.
But we do have I Bleed CUNY Blood Red for our hot summer 70s horror.
We are blood
family
red.
horror. So what are we embarking on here?
Well, you know what, Michael? You reached out and you were like, we just did our, sorry about that. We just did our 5 or 6 movie series about 80s teenage movies.
Comparing Cameron Crowe and
John Hughes.
Yeah.
And you were like, you know what? That was kind of fun. Let's return and do 70s horror or horror in general.
Yeah, I gave you the green light for horror films because I am not a horror person at all.
Do you want my theory about why you did that? You're like, this guy is really not doing anything on this podcast so far, so I'm going to give him the horror.
Okay.
And if he doesn't perform on this, his ass is out.
Okay.
So I think that's what's happening here.
Well,
I feel on the kind of cutting board right now.
Yes, this is your podcast now for the next 5 weeks, basically, because there's only one movie of the 5 you select that I've actually seen.
Yes.
Because I have pushed away from horror most of my life, in large part because being terrified as a kid. I can't watch any torture porn like Saw. Never mind that. That stuff's nuts.
She's hostile.
Starting with what we're starting with alone, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like the closest to basically torture porn I've ever been forced to watch.
I can't do Saw. What are we watching today?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so for me, now what's interesting, and we'll talk a lot more about it, of like why I'm feeling like I'm disconnected, is horror I'm getting the sense of is more about ideas than the actual characters. And so in particular, why the heck family horror? Tell us where we're going, Jim Groom.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So this was a fun one for me because I had just seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre re-released on 4K, and it was in Italy. And it kind of led me down a bit of a rabbit hole with the production of this and thinking about this in terms of, and I always like to use the word ground zero, right? Like, is this ground zero? And arguably, this is the ground zeros for the Michael Myers from Halloween, Jason Voorhees from like Friday the 13th, or Freddy Krueger with Nightmare on Elm Street with Leatherface. Like, Leatherface is now an icon of film.
Yeah.
And you can know Leatherface and know Texas Chainsaw Massacre intimately without ever having seen the film. And I think that's probably been your case before you actually watched the film, right?
Right.
You knew of the kind of, lore of this film.
Yeah, I know Leatherface the way that anybody would know the music from Jaws.
Yeah, exactly.
Which comes in.
That's right. So what I was interested in, it was like, okay, when I got into film and kind of like, not just watching it as a teenager and whatever, and then getting into it, one of the things that really struck me, and we'll talk about this when we talk about Jaws, is people who come with like readings of film that you don't expect. Like, this film is really about X, Y, and like, what? It's really about, Hiroshima? Like, this is about Hiroshima and the nuclear war? Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, that turned to me, Godzilla was a whole new thing for me.
Yeah, me too. When someone first pointed that out to me, I was like, whoa.
And so that's what I started to, when I was at UCLA, what people would start talking about was like, actually, those 70s movies, starting with, and I think for a lot of people, the new wave of horror that we're in right now still is Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
So Night of the Living Dead, George Romero, 1968, starts the zombie kind of craze. But also, that was a film where you featured an African-American or a black guy who was actually the hero, slaps a white woman, right? And basically bullies the white folks in the house as they're getting ready for the zombie invasion, but then is ultimately shot at the end, being mistaken for a zombie by a bunch of hicks in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. There's a real weird kind of political element playing out, because this is also the moment of 1968. This is the moment of the protests. This is a big moment of the 60s. In fact, when he was delivering this film, Night of the Living Dead, to Lincoln Center for it to first be exhibited, Martin Luther King was shot.
Wow.
So there's a real backdrop of the political for the first granddaddy of these kind of new horror, and that's Night of the Living Dead. I think after that, the film that comes up people talk about is Wes Craven's Last House on the Left. But I wouldn't watch that film again.
Oh, good.
It's one of those rape films, right? Like Spit on Your Grave or something like that. And it's I can't do it. I'm too old.
It even makes it's sad because it makes A Clockwork Orange hard to watch too.
Absolutely.
Which is an incredible film.
But it's hard to go back there, right? Yeah. You know, and then hard to kind of justify the watching and all that.
I agree.
So we skipped over that. And for the 70s, we're starting with the 1973 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And that's really appropriate because you could argue that Last House on the Left is a family film. But it's really appropriate because there's no question that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a family film.
I mean, technically, very clearly. I mean, they're never described familial except for towards the very end when there's this notion of brotherhood.
Yes.
Right,
and
between the
hitchhiker,
brothers. Between the hitchhiker and the in Leatherface.
And then the guy who you think is the dad, right?
I still think he's the dad.
He's not. He's the brother. And Toby Hooper says that on the commentary. People, and he doesn't care. You do what you want.
Right.
But he's supposed to be the older brother.
I see.
So that's a weird dynamic, but because it works well as a we'll get ahead of ourselves if we go too deep there. But so you have this family, and it's basically a family of cannibals who kidnap and eat people, right? Is that a fair summary of Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
I don't know if there was any kidnapping in this case. They kind of walked right into being like executed. But
and Leatherface is like, where are they all coming from?
Manna from heaven.
They keep coming.
Yeah.
That is great. So anyway, Texas Chainsaw Massacre in my mind really works. And I was thinking, like, is this really the beginning of this kind of crazy family, thing? And I was thinking about it, and I don't think it is. Actually, you can go back to 1963, where really you get to ground zero of these kind of gore horror movies with Herschel Gordon Lewis, who does two really important films. He does Blood Feast, 63, and then he does 2000 Maniacs. Now, 2000 Maniacs is actually an influence on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because what happens is a bunch of tourists find themselves in a southern town, and the whole town, who's celebrating the anniversary of some Civil War battle, kidnaps them and publicly mutilates them. And the whole town celebrates it. And it's the beginning of a genre that a lot of people think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is part of, called hicksploitation.
Okay. So wait, let me pause you here. So because this history is like all history, literally, to me. And so what I first want to be helped to understand is, how do people enter and get attracted to this genre? Because to me, just these descriptions is what keeps me away from watching them in the first place. And, this idea of these are characters that exist for the sake of an argument, ultimately, right? They're there to communicate grievances in a weird way of the moment of the time, right? Or whatever's wrong with society. Let's keep it simple in that regard. And this is their way of talking about it. But why is horror this expression of that grievance? Or that's my poor way of trying to describe it. But why do you think people are attracted to that kind of descriptive approach?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's almost like, why are people attracted to train wrecks, right? Why are people attracted to I don't know, video bloopers, things where things go totally wrong and they can't stop watching. So there's that maybe human nature piece. Maybe it's not a good explanation, but the other piece, and I think this is where you're going, but correct me if I'm wrong, is I think this is a really fun and easy genre to poke fun at some of the institutions, right? That you don't necessarily, like, no one takes seriously, right? Let's start with the film. Let's start talking a little bit about the film.
Okay.
How does the film start?
Yeah,
it's immediately apparent what you're saying, right?
Right. It's this stream of radio as they're driving. We have these basically 20-somethings that are all driving in a VW van, or just a van. It's actually not a VW van. And we have no idea what they're doing, and they're talking about astrology. And one of my favorite things in the beginning is the Sally character is talking about retrogradation. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And so I had to look that up. And it's basically this illusion of backward movement of a planet in the sky. And so astrology kind of adopted this idea of being a description of chaos and what is wrong in the world. And so Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the entire film is encapsulated in this idea of, retrogradation, things are coming apart.
Yeah, the world is in retrograde, right? And that is where I think the use of media is brilliant. We can talk about it, but I think it's also where we start to see, like, what's the context for the film?
Right.
What's the context? Why are we doing 70s American summer horror wax machines?
I forgot. Yeah, it starts with all the flashing of the I jumped ahead.
Decay.
The decaying bodies of the stolen bodies from the grave robber.
Grave robber.
Which is turned into this horrific piece of art, a la like Silence of the Lamb, and the evisceration of the security guard who's hung up performatively after Hannibal Lecter is killed.
And well, it's interesting because they're almost like police photos. It starts as like shook, shook, and you see
a flash.
it. And a lot of the character of Leatherface and a lot of the gruesome nature of this film, which is about cannibalism, which is about murdering and then using people's bones and skin for different designs, comes from a real life character from the from the 50s, Ed Gein or Gein.
Gein, yeah, Gein. We're not sure.
And he's an influence not only on Psycho, but for that character, but he's a major influence for Hooper and for Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
But I learned when I was listening to the commentary with Hooper that Hooper said, I never knew his name.
Really?
But I had relatives. Exactly. But I had relatives who lived in Wisconsin, which is where he had, done his basically grave robbing and then murders.
Yeah.
And he would hear these crazy stories about all the artifacts in his house.
Right.
And they heard about it because the police took these pictures.
Oh, they're so gross.
So these pictures of the decaying bodies are very much like those police pictures of all that crazy furniture of bones and skin that were in his house.
He was a true tanner. It was like he was literally the idea of Buffalo Bill's skin suit literally comes from this man. Who was basically, had mommy issues, right?
He was just like the Psycho, right? The Psycho character.
And he was basically forced to have no social life. He had an older brother, which under circumstances, it's implied that he may have killed his brother because he was the one who was actually socially active and trying to escape his mother's influence, which was obviously, unsurprisingly, steeped in religion as well. And what happened is, so you get the sense that when she died, he comes apart. And this is him trying to reclaim his access to his mother through all this crazy.
So he grave robs women who were her age.
I know.
Skins them.
Yeah.
Creates women's suits.
Yeah.
And then also creates dolls around the house and all these various furniture stuff. And so this is the stories that Hooper's hearing from his Wisconsin relatives.
Right.
And he says, this had a huge influence for me on Leatherface. And it had a huge influence, obviously, for Psycho, which Psycho really is.
Yeah.
I don't think Psycho is the new horror.
No.
But I think you can start that with Night of the Living Dead. I think people agree upon that. But Psycho is the point at which, it's like 2001 for sci-fi. It's the point at which it's like, there can be a new way of thinking about death and violence on screen. Although Hitchcock, because he wanted to get the rating he did, never really showed the violence, right? Just kind of pointed to it.
Right. Well, he obsessed over it ultimately with the shower scene. Like we don't, he just pulls it apart so diagrammatically. And that's actually one of my favorite mini sites. I did a GIF of every shot in Psycho, and it's like 187 images of this evisceration of a woman with a knife in a shower. And you barely, it's all just snapshots. And so you never get to see, but that's the nasty, nasty side.
That's
like
right.
The actual torture or porn or stuff like that. And now it's so gruesome, it's insane because they have access to the special effects. But the thing is, one thing I want to say is like, because the Geen character is great, because this, this actually harkens to Jaws in an interview for the 50th anniversary of the film. And they interviewed Guillermo del Toro, who's, famous filmmaker for horror adjacent stuff, and fantastical films. And my favorite quote about it, horror is about things that shouldn't be but are. And the reality that this is based in reality is literally horrifying. That's the thing that I can't handle about all this, to watch recreations of it, right? But I get why people, the closest I came to, you remember Faces of Death.
Absolutely.
That was the only thing I could handle watching, because it was documentary and I could like kind of turn off certain parts of it. And if people don't know, Faces of Death was this basically snuff porn film that was in video stores, and it was like it was one of the nasty
early YouTube, right, where you saw these horrific things happening, and it was captured on a VHS tape.
Right, and this person made a compilation tape and marketed it through some like who knows distributor, and it became a piece of wildfire folklore for people, like teenager boys, especially in the 80s, would like, have you seen Faces of Death?
Yeah.
Have you seen?
You pull it out from under your bed. You want to watch it? I have it. I got it.
Can I screw with your like young adult life?
I mail ordered it and they sent it to me, and now I have it to ruin you.
Right. And this is pre-Blockbuster, where all safety, homogenized. Like you could find this film in the back aisle of some store, and they'd let any 13-year-old boy check it out because they didn't care.
No.
They were like...
Well, I had the opposite. I love that you brought up Faces of Death, but I had the opposite relationship to Faces of Death. Faces of Death scared me far more than these films.
Oh, okay.
I was like, show me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I cannot deal with watching, them eat monkey brains oh my God. But it was insane.
I know.
Like literally off the, but...
Okay, so now we have to go back to this actual story.
I want to go on a point you made, because you made a great point, is this idea of like documentary, real or not real. Well, that's one of the greatest moments in all of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is the beginning titles.
Yeah.
Where they basically say, what you're about to see is based on real events. And it's, of all people, John Larroquette of Night Court fame.
It's so weird.
It's his first kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's doing this voiceover where they're basically telling the audience, and it's kind of a trope, this happened. This is based on real events. Like, this really happened. And it happened the summer we made it.
Right.
Meaning that the actual film is the real event they're talking about.
Yeah, and this harkens to Blair Witch Project, which became famous in the 90s for being a found tape of these people that are trying to pursue some ghost story, basically, and end up getting murdered in the woods.
Yeah.
And it's all supposed to be... They're supposed to be documentaries, but it's like a mixture of social media, self-facing camera work, and documentary. And Blair Witch Project did it to a T. Whereas this film does too, because that's the thing I didn't realize. Like, this is a film that never should have made mainstream.
Never.
This is a total B movie, and you should talk a lot about how the production sounded.
The production's crazy,
brutal, and similar with Blair Witch Project, you get a sense that this marketing campaign turned it into a viral event, and it becomes something that people consume in ways that you never would expect, nor should they have consumed.
Well, that happens with this film. Yeah. In fact, like, when you think about watching this film now, and I watched this film on the flight over from Italy, and I was talking to my sister about it, and I was like, yeah, and I watched it on the flight.
Wait, so who's the adjacent person that's being
She said, I hope there wasn't a child next to you. Like, the moral police came in right away and were like, my God, how could you do such a thing?
It's like whenever you see a piece of nudity and you're tipping your laptop down and down and down.
The whole time I was like this, like when she was screaming at the end, or we'll talk about.
And her eyeball wall
But
shots.
basically, like, it's a horrific experience. And I think there's interesting pieces about it. I think we're time to maybe get into the movie and talk about it as we usually do. We barely, like, we're just going off in tangent after tangent.
Well, that's the introduction to hot summer 70s horror, family horror.
How you like and so forth. Like and subscribe for more. But the piece that's interesting, and let's get into, because the plot's pretty simple and we can nail that pretty quickly.
Right.
But I think when we started to get into is the photos of the decaying body, the introduction, this is true, and then the radio playing
stories
underneath them going to the cemetery and saying, what bodies have been exhumed and stolen for parts, basically.
But there's all these headlines to make this,
love it.
Culture of the world is screwed up, like the retrogradation of society that we're being fed through the radio. We have oil units exploding. There's a cholera pandemic in San Francisco. There's a blackout at a sporting event that leads to a suicide and people encouraging a second man to jump. A 16-story building collapsing in Atlanta, killing 29 people, and it goes on and on and on like this. Like, the world is just filled with death and portrait, and which reminds me of like Medium Cool, right? Yeah. Which is a famous '60s film.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's this idea of journalism being this passive, supposed to be this. We're the moral witness here, so we can't be engaged, but we literally watch people die, and that's what they're talking about. It's like all these people dying. We're not here to help. We're just here to tell you what happened.
And I just think it's a brilliant device. In fact, Tommy and I, my son who just came with me to America, we were sitting at a bagel store because we love bagels when we come back so much. So we went in and we were watching Long Island 12. And Long Island 12 is the same thing. Man died in Smithtown. Other person drowned. This person, mutilated. It's like, oh my God, we're back. Retrograde is still in style. But one of the things I really love about that media introduction through the radio is it's actually exactly a quote of George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And that George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, it was so low budget. Like, it made, Texas Chainsaw Massacre look like a high budget film. And he used radio almost exclusively to narrate what was happening with the zombies out there.
Right.
Because it's basically a one set shot.
Right.
They're in a house, they get trapped, and then the zombies come at them.
It's like the Blumhouse model.
But the radio paints the picture, and it's really beautifully written, of all the other things that are going out there, and radio stations going offline, and he picks it up in Dawn of the Dead. But I really think that this Texas Chainsaw Massacre does a brilliant job of taking and quoting Romero, and even, I would say honoring Romero with that radio running throughout the film.
Right.
To kind of give you a context of the culture. And the point being is, let's talk about the 70s. Watergate.
Yeah.
Vietnam, right? You got Roe versus Wade. So you got stuff that will come in that are pretty radical, like women's rights.
Equal rights
the whole
amendment
changing nature of that. And you can see the women rights here because these women, they're kind of, they seem somewhat liberated. The whole idea of hippies, free sex.
Yes, but we're gonna torture the women the most for their desire for liberation, because the men just get nice little clean clocks, with the exception of the other marginalized character, the one who's got who's handicapped. But the women, they're literally tortured.
So we do have the context of the 70s, right? And we'll come back to that because that's a big piece. But do we want to do the plot, or do you want me to talk about production?
I think we should let's do some of the production, because this is like one of the things I actually really like about this film is basically an art film.
Yeah.
Right? It's actually incredibly beautiful. And with their meager resources, whatever the American budget version of like resources are, they have nothing. And it's the classic like Kevin Smith style shoestring budget. I'll pay my actors later once we make some money, right?
Exactly.
And which turns out to be a disaster because they keep selling rights. And it's so sad how this film makes money, but in the end, because they've sold all their rights to the distributor and the people that help make the film, it makes me think of like mafia and like porn movies in the 70s.
Exactly.
Like they completely take advantage of these creative people that try to make this film and make something of it. But yeah, it sounds like it was brutal.
Okay, 6 weeks, pretty much. Tobe Hooper tags Daniel Pearl, who's the cinematographer at University of Texas, Austin. And I think he's behind a lot of those shots you love and the beauty. And we could talk about some of them, but he's coming straight out of a master's degree.
That sounds about right.
To save money, they shoot it all on 16 millimeter.
Yeah.
And they need really a ton of light and slow film speed to make it not look grainy.
Right, so when they blow it up.
Yeah, so they blow it up to 35.
Right.
And the film travels well. It still looks beautiful.
And they do, one of my favorite things is like they're super smart, with the exception of dealing with nighttime, which is so hard, and that's why the film's so dark, because they can only illuminate so much outdoors with the budget they have.
Yeah.
It's why, which I know is not your favorite genre, Westerns. Westerns are shot 85% outdoors. And you just are forced to embrace what's the natural environment. Yeah. And as we'll talk about in, Jaws when we get there, filmmakers that embrace natural environments, I love them to death because it leads to this, you're entering a space and it becomes more believable. And you even though these characters are kind of thinly drawn, they're acted amazingly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the spaces are so authentic. So you immediately buy this world that Hooper's built.
It's true, too. And most of it is filmed in the world, right? You said outdoors. It's probably one of the lighter horror films where you have all of these murders and all of these moments that are horrific happen in pure daylight.
Yeah.
Think about most horrors. Like, they're dark.
I can't think of most horrors.
You can't. But most horrors don't, like 30% or 40% of the opening actions all in pure sunny daylight.
Right.
Like, that doesn't happen.
Right.
So it's very light, and I think that's part of a production limit.
Yeah.
But it really works well for the film.
Yeah.
The other thing that works brilliant for the film and for our theme is how hot the film seems.
Oh my God.
Even looking at it, you have these 5 kids in the van at the beginning, and
melting.
then they pick up the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
And they're all so hot. And
Yeah.
you can feel the heat.
Yeah.
And it starts with the dead armadillo, and then you get the heat coming off the pavement, and you just feel it. This movie, I've never watched a movie where you felt hot just watching it.
Yeah.
And they said during the production it was like 110 degrees.
Sounded
with
insane.
the lights, it was like 125.
Yeah.
People were passing out. People were always nauseous because they also had all this blood effects. So that would start to smell. Other people couldn't even go near Leatherface because he smelled so bad because they didn't have enough to change his costumes. He had to eat alone. Like, he couldn't hang out with other people because they had no replacement costume.
Yeah, you mentioned in the notes the 18-year-old kid who did the makeup as the father,
John Dugan,
and he's like, "Fuck this! I'm never doing this again. This is so brutal." So he basically did 10 hours of makeup, and they had to shoot everything in one day because he's like, "I'm never doing this again."
So supposedly the final scene, what we call the breakfast scene or the dinner scene, whatever you want to call it. It's a breakfast. That scene and what comes after it was filmed over the course of 27 straight hours of filming.
Oh my gosh.
And by the time, literally, everyone had gone somewhat crazy.
I bet they had.
And this is like 125 degree heat in a room, in a house that's not air conditioned. And so one of the points that Gunnar Hansen, who's plays Leatherface. He's talking a lot, and he's talking like this thespian, and he's really articulate.
In the commentary.
He's in the commentary. He's talking. He's like a thespian. He's articulate. He's talking about all his choices artistically. I'm like, you're fucking Leatherface. Like, what are you talking about, right? But he was like actually into it and good. Anyway, there was a point in that like hour 22 or something where they were cutting her finger so that Grandpa could feed off her blood.
Right.
So there's that point, right?
Yeah.
And so he had a knife, and on the knife there was basically a spot that should put out blood, and so he could do it. And they kept on, it wasn't working, and they kept on doing. They did like 13, 14 shots, and it wouldn't work. Whatever, how many shots? I don't have the exact number. He talks about it. Finally, he just cut her finger open.
Oh my God.
He just cut her open. Yeah. And she was screaming because he had cut her open.
He's like, fuck this. I want this shot over. Let me actually cut Sally.
Exactly. And he did. And think about that. We've talked about in the 70s production values and how out of control it was.
Yeah.
Basically, people left it. There was a scene with the it was a real, actual chainsaw.
I know. Yeah. And like the stories of, so the Pam and Kirk characters, right, which are the first to die.
Yeah.
And so in the Kirk character, who's just been clocked on the head with a sledgehammer by Leatherface as he walks in the door, and he's attracted by he goes in there hearing like pig sounds, something like that, squealing, and he's like, "Hello." It's like, and now these are tropes. I love this. It's like I love how I'm watching the origin of horror tropes, that exist now just in popular culture, in commercials and memes and all this kind of stuff. And so he goes into the house that's basically haunted. It's really creepy in there. It's like, no one's answering the door. Let me just enter this strange house and walk forward, and then out pops a giant man in a mask and clocks me in the head and kills me.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, too, because it's a really quick kill.
Yeah.
And it's not gory.
No.
And the film is not gory, which is interesting.
Well, I mean, it's the hiding of the monster, so it is terrifying though. Like I don't need to see the gore to be
gory.
No, I don't need to see the gore to be terrified, because for me, by far, the two most terrifying scenes are when, obviously, so the Pam character follows up and tries to say, like, because they're basically investigating. They're just to set the scene for people that haven't seen the film. These 5 20-somethings have all gone to this house, which is owned by both Sally and Franklin. Sally and Franklin's parents' house that's been abandoned, and they're just kind of, oh, this is cool, let's check it out. And so they said, Franklin's like, oh, there's a swimming hole, and so we get a sense that Pam and Kirk, a couple, are going to just go do some skinny dipping, but the swimming hole's dried up, it's gone. Yeah. But so they keep exploring, and
because he wants to find gas, right? Because that's the other thing, they don't have gas.
Yeah, and this is the beginning of the sinister hammering sound. Like as they come to the Leatherface family home, which is like a classic American Gothic white home. It's a beautiful farm house. Like you get a sense it's on farmland.
Everyone has camouflage cars in their backyard.
Yeah, the VWs under the camo netting should have been a red flag.
Is it a war scene, or are they hiding cars?
Yeah,
right?
I know. It's like, what is that about? That would be like, Pam, let's not keep going here. We should maybe head back.
He was like, oh, this is interesting, and there's cars under here.
Yeah,
and they keep going.
And so they make it to the porch of this house, and no one's answering. And this is the beginning. They both, he investigates further, gets killed. Pam, meanwhile, is hanging out on a bench, and so she follows us like, Kurt, and she, at first, so she also stumbles into the house, but she stumbles into basically Ed Gein's life.
That's like his living room.
Like she literally stumbles into this. There's a chaise lounge made of human bones.
Yeah.
There's feathers everywhere, and then there's bones of both animals and humans, and it's insane. And there's a live chicken in a bird cage
hanging. And the chicken is, that's so dark.
Yeah. And so she finally comes to her senses and starts to run away to get out of this space, but Leatherface grabs her. And this leads to not only the most terrifying moment of the film for me, as well as one of the most dangerous moments in the film.
Oh my God.
Leatherface takes her and literally places her, while flailing and trying to escape his grasp, on a meat hook. And in modern horror, they would have just like impaled her. It would have been so bad.
And you see her like expression, like, because you literally, all her weight takes her on the meat hook.
Right.
And and then she can see everything that's happening. And what does he do? He proceeds to cut up her boyfriend.
Right. And this is one of the moments where, the actor who plays Kirk, William Vale, described later on, like, he almost got like literally sawed.
Yeah.
They have a chainsaw running 3 inches from his face. Talk about crazy 70s stuff.
And he was getting hit with things that it was hitting in his face, but he was just like, what? And there's another interesting production. But there's that moment where she gets off of the swing in front of the house, and she's like, where are you, Kirk? Right. And she's walking up, and they do this beautiful shot of 40 feet of track that goes underneath the seat, and it kind of focuses on her from below and the house. Most beautiful, arguably one of the most beautiful shots in the scene. And they had to fight for that shot.
Yeah.
And they did, because the producer's like, no, this is done, let's move on. And it goes to your point, it really reinforces, like, Pearl and Hooper were really about making this a beautiful art film.
It's amazing.
And they were also, and this is something that Hooper was kind of bemoaning. He was like, it was also supposed to be funny. And he's like, it never got any of that credit because everyone was so freaked out by it.
Well, I would agree with that. Like, they should have wrote more jokes, you know.
But
they needed a punch-up writer.
But when the brother comes home, after, you know, all of this has happened and basically Leatherface had taken all the kids and, you know, essentially killed them, except for one who's running scared.
Right.
They go home and he's like, have you no pride of ownership, cutting up the door? And he's kicking the other brother.
I mean, this is the core of the family moment of the film, which is actually quite interesting. It's fun.
Great.
Like, so, you know, Sally has somehow escaped twice or once so far, right? Because Sally, you know, it leads to, you know, so we get Pam and Kurt get eviscerated.
Yeah, bad. That's the worst. You're right.
Yeah.
That's the worst moment.
And then, you know, back at the old house where, you know, back at the Hardesty house, you know, Sally and Franklin's house, Jerry, who's like, you get a sense is Sally's partner's like, I'm going to go try to find Pam and Kurt. He walks off into the sunset, which is one of the most beautiful shots in the film.
Yeah, right.
Right. And he gets clocked immediately by Leslie.
It's a quick one.
Yeah,
right?
he's totally quick kill.
He sees her in the fridge.
Yeah.
So now she's in the fridge, which is dark.
Yeah. And she's still alive.
Oh.
Yeah.
He opens her up, and then he's like, oh my God. She jumps out kind of like a vampire, and then he turns around, and Leatherface just knocks him. One hit, done.
And so Jerry is gone again. And so we're stuck with, now it's down to Franklin and Sally.
Can we talk a second about Franklin?
Yeah, Franklin's an important character ultimately
because
he's also a brother, right? So, you know, leading up to, because we still have to get back to the Leatherface family, but there is technically another family.
We always get there.
Franklin and Sally are brother and sister in this film, and Franklin is, you know, we don't know, he's in a wheelchair. We don't know what's wrong with him, and he's a featured character at the start of the film. Like, the first thing we see them doing as a group is basically going to the side of the road to let Franklin get out to go pee. And they have basically a couple of 2x4s that they build this makeshift ramp so he can ramp himself out of the van. And
it's one of the first kind of horrors I can think of where you have someone with a disability.
Yeah.
Like, and that plays a big part in Franklin's character, but also the way people treat him.
Yeah.
I think Franklin's the best actor in the film.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the most memorable character.
He's the most fleshed out character by far. And so, because he's actually given grievances on a personal level. Like, he's trying to make sense of, like, at some point, we learn that his sisters invite him on this trip which is implying that Franklin is kind of a shut-in. He doesn't get to do much. And it's like, come on, we'll have fun. Let's go out. It'll be a road trip. And Franklin in the van is the questioner. He's the one who's like because he's the one who interacts with the hitchhiker the most, which we've kind of ignored.
We should talk about the hitchhiker.
There's too much to talk about.
We should talk about him, though, because it brings us back to themes, but go.
Yeah, so, you know, Franklin is the one who's curious, ultimately.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, Sally's wrapped up in her astrology talk, and it's just, he's this focal point, and, you know, he's struggling when he we learn quickly that he's wheeled out so he can pee in a can, so he can have a moment of privacy, because obviously it's more difficult, but then he goes flailing, he falls down.
They forget him.
Yeah, they forget him.
Let him go.
And he goes flying down the hill, which is poor Franklin.
Jesus.
But also Franklin later on, you know, when they get to the house, they immediately ditch him, right? He's like, stuck. He's out of the van, but he's on the ground and it's rough terrain, and him getting in the house isn't easy, and the other four are having fun exploring.
Yeah, and they're obviously couples, so he's the odd man out.
Right.
But he's highly annoying.
Right.
Sally!
Yeah.
Sally! Shut up, Franklin. I mean, he is, and I think everybody, that's why I think he's so good, is he annoys the shit out of everybody in that van.
Yeah.
And the quick moment, I know it's just, there's a lot.
The great thing is, because we're here, we have no idea how long we're going.
No, it doesn't matter. So anyway, they pick up this hitchhiker. This hitchhiker actually happens to be one of the brothers of the crazy Leatherface family.
Yeah.
And he comes, he's like, yeah, he's all obsessed. Yeah. And they're like, you know, we smell something. Is that a meat? He's like, oh yeah, my whole family used to work there. And he starts to tell them about the history. And Franklin's the one who's saying, Didn't they? He was the one who was telling everybody that they now kill the cattle with more, humane ways, right? And there's a whole weird thing about
he talks
humane
about
murder.
Right? Like the idea of like, we used to have to sledgehammer him like 20 times before they'd kill him. Now we just have the bolt gun.
And that's where the brother was like, oh no, the sledge was much better way. You really knew they were dead. But that also was the point where the whole 70s economy changing, the automation of the economy. The whole idea is that this family, Leatherface family, had all lost their jobs. They used to work at the cattle ranch.
Yeah, at the packing plant.
And their jobs are gone.
Their slaughterhouse
and
family.
The whole idea with the grandfather was he killed 60 in 5 minutes.
Right.
And that's that whole moment that they're referring to. Like, there's the whole crisis of the 70s, financial and otherwise, that they're embedded in, right? So I think he does a really good, subtle job, Hooper, in setting that up with that character.
Right. And it's alluded to again in one of the most kind of bizarre ways, which brings us back to the moment where Sally has escaped. So Jerry goes out, and God, the crazy thing is, so Jerry's whacked, and then finally Sally forces Franklin, because Franklin's like, I don't want to go. Let's just get out of here. Let's use why aren't we using the car? Which is really sensible
he was the smart one.
So she pushes him through the woods because following the same trail that all three of them have gone to their death, and Leatherface is there waiting for them.
Yeah.
And Leatherface literally eviscerates Franklin.
Absolutely. In the wheelchair. It's a crazy scene. That was a jump scare for me.
Yeah.
That's a big jump scare when he comes out to Franklin. I just jumped out of my chair because I had the headphones on. I was in the airline watching.
Everybody look.
And then I'm jumping up, and the person next to me is like, hey, what's wrong with this guy? I was like out of my seat 3 inches when he came.
Yeah. And this leads to the pursuit of Sally for the next 5 minutes, and she escapes to the gas station. Right? But the gas station owner turns out to be
the third brother.
The oldest brother.
Or the father, depending on how you want to see it.
There's no phone here.
There's no phone here. And then he comes in with a bag and is like, don't worry, just be quiet. Because she's freaking out because she was just chased by Leather. And this actress is, supposedly, and that's what they were saying in the commentary, like, it was only half acting. Like, she was literally like being abused throughout the film and the production of the film. Right. And like they had run her literally to her end. Like they had to stop filming. She had all knees busted up, bloody, ripped up, like literally
running
had
through
to
the
fall
woods.
off the roof. She didn't do.
She did the stunts?
She did the stunt of falling off the roof. It was a joke that they said this, like, she couldn't jump through the window, so someone else jumped through the window, but she had to fall off the roof.
Holy shit!
So like literally, like,
so the jumping through the window sounds like the easier job.
Absolutely, and so she was doing most of the stunts.
Oh my god!
And was really in bad shape, and you can see it if you watch that film, knowing just production wise how, she was in it.
Right.
It makes the film that much more powerful. But anyway, he comes in with the bag and with the broom.
And he prods her with the broom.
Starts beating the shit out of her with the broom.
Oh, it's so bad.
It is a rough, that's the other thing about this. Like when I talked about the Hicksploitation, right?
Yeah.
And that 2000 Maniacs. This is a very sadistic film.
Yes.
It is absolutely, when you watch it, you feel like, am I a sadist? Do I
That's
just want to watch
you are
people?
A sadist. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is why I find myself, I'm the common man. I'm the Brody, which we'll be talking about at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm a little faint at heart when it comes to this kind of stuff. And her, so there's Pam,
which goes back to your first question.
Yeah.
Why? But we'll go to that.
And then the Sally character who's pursued for the remainder of the film. Like, we're talking, she's like has to deal with this familial torture by the Leatherface
for a
family
good 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It is sadistic.
Yeah, and
she's screaming.
Yeah,
bloody murder.
Time. She must have been exhausted by this entire experience. The amount of screaming she had to do, like her lungs must have vocal cords fried.
And that scene, which is probably the most famous scene of them all around the table,
right?
The breakfast scene,
which is like the most important scene of the entire film.
Yeah, I think
right.
We should
and
talk
so
about
that's
that.
I think we should kind of close around because this is the interrogation of family ultimately.
Yeah.
Right. And so once they finally get Sally back in their clutches, they decide to not. She's the only one they don't basically kill immediately, other than Pam too, who was like hung on a meat cleaver. But this is even more sadistic because they compel her to first enjoy their family meal of her friends.
Yeah.
You know, and she sat.
They're eating.
She sat at the head of the table, but when I found, there's a famous horror writer who made the point of describing this, and I'm blanking on his name. And
Kim Newman?
Yes, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. He described this as an interrogation of the nuclear family. So instead of seeing her as at the head of the table participating, she's an observer, kind of like the camera is an observer of Leave It to Beaver's family, right?
Sure.
Like this is the classic 50s nuclear family shot where it's the kind of point of view of like, you're at the table too, isn't that so nice? And we have the full family. And so he makes this point of describing we have, you know, the owner, the oldest brother, who's effectively, or I thought of him as the father.
He's the father. They treat him like it.
He's the father figure. Yeah. And then we have Leatherface, who's now in drag.
Yeah, he's like the mom,
and he's literally put makeup on his face,
and he squeals differently, kind of. He's like wah, 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 versus the more horrific.
And then we have the naughty teenager hitchhiker, who's gotten in trouble for getting whacked by the dad figure for like yet again robbing graves and putting exposure around the family.
Caught. Stop robbing those graves.
Yeah, and in the meantime, like even though Leatherface is the mother character in this shot, he's also eviscerated by the father. It's like, you're just fucking up the door because he cuts up his own door.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, why you leave your brother all alone again?
And then the younger brother, the hitchhiker, is like, what are you talking about? We do all the work.
Yeah.
We do all the killing. You just sit around and enjoy it.
Right. And we do learn that the father, the old man or the cook, he's also referenced as.
Yeah.
Right. He's the cook.
He's the cook. He doesn't do any of the real work.
Right. And so this interrogation of family is the most direct to technically the theme of this podcast.
Yeah.
But it's important. I appreciate it for that level. But man, what Sally is forced to compel. So instead of us being able to enjoy a family, Sally is our avatar of being absolutely disgusted by and tortured by what I'm forced to witness.
Yeah, and the whole idea is like, you know, is it a play on the American sitcom family in the most insane, you know, biological extension, you know, hyperbolic, horrific moment. Right. And so this is kind of, like you said, it was thorough. And it was interesting because in the commentary, this is Daniel Pearl, Toby Hooper, and Gunnar Hansen. So Gunnar Hansen plays Leatherface, Toby Hooper directed it, and Pearl was the shooter. They talk about that reading, I think, and that's what they're referencing. So I'm going to play this quicker.
Oh, right.
Because I think it's a very funny moment where they reflect on that, right? So check this out.
Watergate.
So Hooper's talking about the influence of Watergate on the idea of the film.
That, and there was a song called Dead Dog in the Middle of the Road.
Stinking eye.
Yeah.
That's a song that influenced it.
Nothing. But then again, I guess it said everything. She really cares about your problems, dude.
Now, here's the final one.
So you mean this film is really not about the breakdown of the American family?
So I don't know if that's Hansen or Pearl, but they're playing with the idea that so many critics have talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they're both inside joking it about it's really not the breakdown of the American family. Like, that's really not what this film. And it's kind of an inside joke amongst them, but it's also how different it must be for the people who created this thing.
Yeah.
And who built out this thing as kids, kind of making their first film and doing this thing, and then having the success of that vision lead to a whole critical, philosophical, and analytical world where they think about your film and how important it is on the culture, right? Yeah. This film was now part of a cultural relic. It was adopted. And it must be weird for the producer and creator of that piece of work to then sit back and have people like us or whoever like pontificate around like this nightmare vision. and what it means and try and make sense of it. Now, I love it because that's the fun piece of culture and criticism, and I dig it. But I think it's always interesting to hear artists kind of poke fun at that or like kind of resist it, right? As if that's not really what we're doing. But it's like, it doesn't matter. Because once you create a piece of art, which this has become, it's anyone's game.
Right.
And that's the fun of it. So I really, I think that for me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a really good example of a film that might be thought of as a video nasty or just a horrific moment in, the development of, I would say, contemporary American horror. And it's so influential, like you said, it's almost hard not to see it in every film that you've watched after. But I think for me, it's what the horror genre does best. And it's actually a very subtle, because it can say it slant, it can say it really exaggerated, critique of our culture at our moment. Now, does that happen consistently over the course of the next 50 years? I don't know. I think it changes. Horror really starts to cannibalize itself. If you know, every horror movie from our generation, like the 70s and 80s, all have remakes in the 2000s and 2010s, and they're remade shot for shot.
Right.
They're just complete remakes. They're not even changed.
I still wonder, what were they thinking when they remade Psycho that way, too? It's like an academic exercise, which is so bizarre.
Yeah, and this film gets remade in many ways like that. I mean, so many of the films of that moment get remade. And I wonder if that has its own commentary on the industry of Hollywood and what it's going through, and maybe some of the lack of its own, I don't know, ideas, creativity. A lot of that stuff has moved to the gaming world. Who knows? But there's a kind of interesting moment, like, where horror those films from our childhood are still in many ways the kind of monolithic thing in that genre everyone's still looking at. I mean, Romero, this movie made in 1968, and zombies are still all anyone does films for like 50 years. It's crazy.
And I think like the idea that the culture has this way of dictating where now I know that what's interesting is that tension between the artist, and what the culture turns it into. But that's the immaturity of the artist in some ways, in my mind, right? You think you're doing this, and you're like, oh, this is going to be cool. We're going to have chainsaws. We're going to have these people in the, running around in the night and the dark, and ultimately they wanted to make money too.
Yeah, exactly.
They did. It was a commercial venture to to this day, horror, Blumhouse, it's a reliable genre that has its culture that follows it and sells. And so that's what they were, in my mind, tapping into, and the immaturity that goes with being like a 20-something that think they can make a movie and people are going to watch it and we'll get rich or we'll make our way into the world of cinema. And that was a dream into the 90s. That was the Kevin Smith dream. It was reinvented, if you think about it. We had our brief re-envisioning of indie cinema again in the 90s, and Kevin Smith was and Quentin Tarantino in a way gets wrapped into that as well, that lore of the 90s rebirth of indie cinema that lasted for a hot minute before it gets adopted again and acculturated into big Hollywood machine. And that's what this is about. It's like the Hollywood machine does take over when Hollywood sees something that people value. They're like, ooh, how can we commodify this?
Next, and we can talk about films will come. But the other point too, and I like what you're saying about the artist stuff, is another point there too is when you're in your 20s and making your first film, and you strike gold, which they did, right? Hooper never makes a film like this as good as this again.
He gets Poltergeist, but he's not really the director.
And Poltergeist is no Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as good as it is, and I like it, and I love Blood Force. Exactly, I like a lot of those films. But here's a guy makes his first film, for Hollywood or not Hollywood, independent, gets this band of people, all locals, save a couple, absolutely kills it. And have a moment, you know what I mean? Everyone in their life wants a moment like that. And they had it, that group in Texas at that moment. And, to look back on it and say, oh, that was our moment. and kind of say, look what all these people are doing with it. And every one of those people who were in that film, like, that's still like, yeah, I was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I filmed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I got killed in the Texas Chainsaw. Like that is their claim to fame.
Yeah.
Even down to Hooper.
Yeah.
And I think that's funny. There's a story, a great story about Tobe Hooper where, and I might have told this already, but I'll tell it again, where he's somewhere in London or somewhere in England, and he's in this place, and it's actually a place where people edit videos or edit movies. It's basically a stage, film stage. And he's in there, and someone says, hey, do you want to meet Stanley Kubrick? And Hooper's like, what, Stanley Kubrick? He's like, yeah, you want to meet him? He's like, sure. They go. Stanley Kubrick comes out of his editing room and says, I'm a big fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I own it.
No.
So I have a copy
He's
of
got
it.
probably like a print too, like an actual
He's got
film
a print of it.
Yeah.
And so, Tobe Hooper's like, oh my God, Stanley Kubrick, he's my hero. And then Kubrick's fine, goes back into his editing booth. And then he realizes that Kubrick, in 1983, and that's important, is editing The Shining.
Oh my God.
So The Shining came out in 1980. So in 3 years later, he's still editing The Shining.
Wow.
Which I think is a great Hooper and Kubrick story.
It's a movie that we don't feel ready for, but we will get there someday.
One day, yeah.
I think The Shining will...
It's the ultimate family movie.
It is the ultimate family horror, which is probably a way to, wrap up round one.
Oh my God, what is it called again? What is our name?
Hot Summer 70s Family Horror.
For life.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.